কাহা মোরা স্বরূপ রূপ, কাহা সনাতন, কাহা মোরা আর কাহা দাসা রঘুনাথ পতিত পাবন, কাহা দাসা আর কাহা দাস রঘুনাথ পতিত পাবন, কাহা দাস রঘুনাথ পতিত কাহা মোরা বট্ট যুগ, কাহা কবিরাজ, কালে কোথা গেলা গৌর নট রাজ, আমি পাষাণ কোটিব মাতা অনলে পশিব, পাষাণ কো আর গৌরাঙ্গ গো নেরানে দে কোথা গেলে পাব, গৌরাঙ্গ গো সেসব সঙ্গের সঙ্গে যে কইল বিলাস, সেসব সঙ্গের সঙ্গে আর সে সঙ্গ না পায়া কান্দে নরোত্তম দাস, সে সঙ্গ না পায়া কান্দে আর যে আনিল প্রেম ধন করুণা প্রচুর, যে আনিল আচার্য ঠাকুর এন প্রভু জয় জগন্নাথ দাস বাবাজি জয় আচার্য ঠাকুর জগন্নাথ দাস বাবাজি জয় আচার্য ঠাকুর জয় জয় তামাল কৃষ্ণ গোস্বামী আচার্য ঠাকুর তামাল কৃষ্ণ গোস্বামী জয় আচার্য ঠাকুর জয় তামাল কৃষ্ণ জয় জয় প্রভুপাদ 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 প্রভুপাদ
Jayam Vishnupad Paramhansa Parivrajacharya Sutara Sata Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sakho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adigor Bhaktarinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shaima Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today is a most auspicious day. It is the Pratipat of Falgun Mas, 15 days before the appearance day of Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu. And normally at this time, we hear the Srimad Bhagavatam. But today we'll be glorifying the Bhagavats, the devotees of the Lord. There are 3 devotees who disappeared on this auspicious day. Well, appeared. Appearance day is of Sri Rasik-ananda Prabhu, the foremost disciple of Sri Shamananda Pandit. And then the disappearance of Srila Dasa Babaji, coming in our line of disciplic succession. And also the disappearance day of our beloved godbrother, Srila Tamal Krishna Das Goswami. So we'll begin with the foremost and most senior, and that is Sri Rasik-ananda Prabhu. Now Rasikananda Prabhu, he wrote a very beautiful ashtakam glorifying the Bhagavats. So because we won't be reading the Srimad Bhagavatam today, I've taken that English translation for us to hear about why we glorify the pure devotees of the Lord who are the person Bhagavats. I always pray to and offer my dandavats to all the Bhagavats who are like honeybees drinking nectar from the sweet lotus feet of Sri Govinda Dev. By relishing the nectar of the most exalted love for Krishna, they have renounced the material world and become absorbed in unalloyed devotion to the Lord. Bliss and satisfaction saturate their pure minds. Prem illuminates their faces. They forever enjoy swimming in the ocean of nectar churned from hearing Krishna Katha. Even though Dharma, Artha, Kam, Moksha fall down at their lotus feet offering service, the Bhagavats simply neglect them. They do not even glance at these allurements. Miseries are unknown to them. Tasting the nectar of love for Krishna, they see the vast trouble-filled ocean of material existence as insignificant to cross as the water contained in a calf's hoofprint. They have independently and firmly bound the lotus feet of Krishna with the rope of their topmost prem. Although continually looking, Lord Brahma and Shiva never attained the lotus feet of Krishna, the Lord of the Brajagopis. But the Bhagavats are always in bliss from drinking the intoxicating nectar flowing from Govindaji's lotus feet. They give pleasure to Brahma, all the Vaishnavas, and everyone in the universe. By Krishna's desire, they take the form of ordinary humans and come to earth in order to liberate the conditioned souls. Their appearance brings good fortune to the material world, and their lotus feet provide a boat for living entities to cross over the ocean of repeated birth and death. Simply seeing the devotees gives a taste of nectar, stops the samsara chakra, and cuts the hard knot of material attachment. Honoring the water from their lotus feet destroys the threefold miseries. Talking with them increases one's love for Krishna, the hero of Braj. Overwhelmed with ecstatic love, their bodies are always radiant, and their hair standing on end. Streams of loving tears continually wash their lotus faces. Moment to moment, they enjoy spiritual happiness. Dancing blissfully and with voices choked in loving emotions, they loudly sing the glories of Sri Krishna, the Lord of the Gopis. Relishing Krishna Prem is their only vow. Their hearts are always softened by remembering Krishna's lotus feet, the reservoir of bliss. Because Krishna floods their hearts, gentle smiles adorn their beautiful faces. They please everyone by their divine qualities. They are grateful to all and reservoirs of ever-flowing mercy. Even in dreams, they never forget Krishna for a moment. With pure, unalloyed devotion, they are completely devoted to the Supreme Lord Krishna. They are joyful abodes of wonderful qualities. They live in this world as incarnations of pure love for Radha and Krishna. The Shruti fal of hearing this Bhagavata Astakam is, this Bhagavata Astakam bestows all auspiciousness and awards one the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. It increases the excellence of bhakti and gives prem at every moment. One who faithfully reads this prayer will quickly obtain the highest ecstatic love for Krishna. The Bhagavats live in Krishna's heart, and they completely control that Gopi Jana Ballabha, Sri Krishna, by their pure love. I always pray and offer my dandavats to the Bhagavats. So this having been written by Sri Rasik-ananda Prabhu, who was the disciple of Sri Shyamananda Prabhu, we know here our beloved deities' names are Shri Shri Radha Shyama Sundar. When Srila Prabhupada decided to name the deities Radha Shyama Sundar, there were different options. We all thought that Prabhupada would name the deities Radha Govindaji because he had worshipped Radha Govinda in his childhood. But behind us, there was a Khanda Kirtan going on. Nitai Gaur, Radhe Shyam, we won't say the rest. So Prabhupada, because we always had to hear this Kirtan, and our temple president at that time, Dhananjaya, he suggested that Prabhupada, why not name the deities Radhe Shyam, Radha Shyam Sundar? And then Prabhupada made a mantra, Nitai Gaur, Radhe Shyam, Jai Krishna Balaram. So we used to sing that mantra, and that is how our deities became named Radha Shyam Sundar. But the original deity of Radha Shyam Sundar was given by Srimati Radharani personally to Shyamananda Prabhu. At that time his name was Dukhi Krishna Das, and he was the disciple of Hriday Chaitanya Prabhu. from Navadvip Dham. He came here and his service was to sweep the Seva Kunj every day. One day he found a golden nupur and he kept it in his cloth. It was Radharani's ankle belt. And Lalita came to ask him for it, but he wouldn't give it until he could meet the person who it belonged to. So she had him bathe in Lalita Kund. He came out as a beautiful maiden, and he got the darshan of Srimati Radharani. And she put that ankle bell on his forehead, which made a special tilak mark. And she gave him a new name, Shyamananda, because he pleased Srimati Radharani, Shama. So when his spiritual master heard about this, he came all the way from Navadvip thinking that Jiva Goswami had reinitiated his disciple. And there was a huge crowd that came with him to object to this aparadh. So both Jiva Goswami and Shyamananda, they were sworn to secrecy by Srimati Radharani. And Jiva Goswami, because he couldn't tell the real reason, said, you just try to remove that tilak. If you can't remove it, then you'll understand that there's something very divine here. So when they tried to take off that tilak, it wouldn't be removed. And then Hridaya Chaitanya Prabhu understood that this is the divine arrangement, and this history came out in public. So Shyamananda Prabhu and Srinivasacharya and Narottam Das Thakur were the principal students of Srila Jiva Goswami at that time. The head of our sampradaya, Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, had already left this world, and they had left behind volumes of literature that needed to be distributed, book distribution. So Jiva Goswami sent out these 3 students to preach Krishna consciousness in the form of the 6 Goswamis' literatures all over northern and eastern India. And it's a long story how they finally reached Bengal. The books did not reach with them. They were stolen. Srinivasacharya was able to retrieve those books and brought them. And because Shyamananda Pandit was from Orissa, he was recommended to go and start his preaching of Gaur-Nitai's teachings in Orissa. So he went there, and at that time, of course, everyone is a great devotee of Lord Jagannath in Oriya. And there were many different provinces there. One of them was the province of Rohini. And the Maharaj of Rohini province, Achyuta Das, he didn't have any son. But by the grace of Lord Jagannath, his son was born on this very day. And there was great celebrations, and his son proved to be a natural Vaishnava, pure devotee of the Lord from his childhood. He was very learned, and at a young age, he was praying to Jagannath to please send him a guru. He was 18 years old at the time. His parents had gotten him married very early in his age, in his life. His wife was also a devotee of the Lord, a Vaishnavi. And in dream, the Lord told him that the next day you will meet your guru, Shyamananda. So Shyamananda and Rasikananda, they met, and they recognized one another, and tears were in their eyes, and Shyamananda gave initiation both to Rasikananda, who at that time was Rasik Murari. He gave the name Rasikananda, and also to his wife, who he named Shyamadasi. After some time, he also gave a beautiful murti named Gopi Jana Ballabha to Rasikananda and his wife. And he had his wife become the chief priest to worship that deity. Rasikananda then moved to another village in his father's kingdom called Kashipur, and Shyamananda renamed that village as Gopi Ballabpur. And all of the inhabitants of that village, they became immersed in love for Gopi Jana Ballabha. The deity worship went on so beautifully. So Rasikananda and Shyamananda, with their extensive preaching throughout Orissa, they made thousands of devotees without any distinction whatsoever as to whether they were qualified or unqualified. Even wild animals became devotees of the Supreme Lord by the potency of Sri Rasik-ananda Prabhu. One envious person once sent a wild animal to kill Rasikananda, and Rasikananda, by chanting the name of Gauranga, Gauranga, Krishna, Krishna, was able to tame that elephant, and he began to trumpet Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So what to speak of we, who are lower even than the wild animals here, this line of disciplic succession has that potency of making even the most unqualified into lovers of Sri Krishna. So Rasikananda, a long history of the Gopinath deity, which was personally made by Ramachandra at Chitrakoot to show Srimati Sita Devi his Dwarpa Yuga pastimes. So that deity, after Sita Devi and Ramachandra left on their travels, the worship was continued by Lord Brahma, and he would personally come there every day to worship the Gopinath deity. This Gopinath deity is from black stone. There are eight gopis surrounding Gopinath and 5 manjaris, and also Balaram killing Mushtika and Krishna killing Chanura and cows. Everything is within this one deity. So at one point, a king came to Chitrakoot, found that deity. He assumed that it wasn't being worshipped. He couldn't see Lord Brahma. And in a dream, the deity told him to bring him back to Orissa. So he was going to bring him to Jagannath Puri, but on the way, another dream came, and the deity told him, "You keep me here at this Ramana Gang," which now is known as Remuna. So the Gopinath deity was installed there, and as Rasikananda was traveling and preaching, he became very attracted to worshiping the Gopinath deity. So for 40 years, he traveled and preached throughout Orissa. And then, as the end of his life came near, he settled in Remuna to do his bhajan before the Kirchur Gopinath deity. Now, the descendants of Rasikananda, because he was a grihasta, he had 3 sons. They have continued the worship in 3 places. And that is at Gopi Balapur, beautiful deity worship is still going on there. At Kirchur Gopinath in Remuna, and here at the Radha Shyam Sundar temple as well. The original deity that was given by Srimati Radharani is there in the temple. Later, more deities were added to increase the beauty and the potency of the worship. And Rasikananda, at the end of his life, he told his disciples to begin Sankirtan. He entered into the temple of Gopinath and disappeared. And when his disciples saw that he had disappeared, there was no trace of him, they also gave up their bodies. So their Pushpa Samadhis are there at the Kirchur Gopinath temple, and this is just a small sampling of the glorious life of Sri Rasik-ananda Prabhu, the foremost disciple of Sri Shyamananda Pandit. Next, we have coming in our line of disciplic succession, coming from Rupa Goswami, Narottam Das Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti, Baladev Vidyabhushan, his disciple, Uddhav Das Babaji, then Madhusudan Das Babaji. Another great Vaishnava appeared in what is now East Bengal or Bangladesh, in the district of Myaman Singh. that devotee, he was born in an aristocratic family, and he simply wanted to worship the Supreme Lord in his lifetime. So he left his home and he went to live in Braja. There he met Madhusudan Das Babaji at the holy place of Surya Kund. Surya Kund is the place where Srimati Radharani goes to worship Surya Bhagavan Narayan. And the Babajis, they are absorbed in the Nitya Leela of the Lord, remembering the eternal pastimes of Shri Radha and Krishna at the different Leela stands here in Braja. So because his guru, Madhusudan Das Babaji, was doing his bhajan at Surya Kund, Jagannath Das Babaji, he also took residence there. And he was so strict in his bhajan, he would rise at 3 a.m, chant the entire day and night, only take a little something at night. Sometimes he would also go to Rishikesh and perform the Purush Charana Yagya. That yagya was so austere, chanting throughout the day and night, bathing at 3 a.m. in the Ganga, and if there were any bodily functions, they would have to bathe again in the Ganga. And they could not speak throughout the whole day until evening time. For 2 months, Jagannath Das Babaji performed this yagya of Nama Sankirtan, simply chanting, and inadvertently one day he spoke to his servant Bihari. He started all over again and spent another 3 months performing this bhajan. And at the end he told his disciple Bihari that if you want the darshan of Sri Krishna in the form of Gauranga Mahaprabhu, then one should perform this particular yagya. So Jagannath Das Babaji, he lived there in Surya Kund for many years, about 40 years, but at one point in 1880, Bhaktivinoda Thakur came with his youngest son and his wife, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur took the darshan of Jagannath Das Babaji and learned about the system of bhajan from him. So they kept in contact. And at one point, Bhaktivinoda Thakur asked Jagannath Das Babaji that the place where Chandkazi broke the mridanga, those pieces of the mridanga must be somewhere in the ground. Can you please come and identify those places so we can find the pieces of the mridanga? So immediately Jagannath Das Babaji, by that time he was very old, he couldn't walk anymore, and his body was bent over like a semicircle. His eyes were also, because of his age, he couldn't pick up his eyelids anymore. His disciples would have to pick up his eyelids so that he could see. And he was engaged in bhajan, chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra all day and night. But when he got this invitation from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he immediately went to the Mathura Junction railway station, got on a train, and went there to Navadvip. And by his divine vision, he was able to identify the place. He had the people dig up that place, and they found the chips of the mridanga from that original mridanga that was broken. At that time also, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was trying to locate the original place of the birth of Sri Nimai Pandit. He was searching because he was also a magistrate. He had access to all of the government maps and all of the histories of that area of Nadia district. He was searching the ancient maps, and he found that according to the maps, that birthplace was on the eastern side of the Ganga, whereas Navadvip was only about 100 years old. And that was where the Pandits were saying that the birthplace was. So he was searching and searching, and he needed confirmation from a pure devotee. So again he called Jagannath Babaji. Jagannath Babaji was carried by Bihari on his shoulder. He came to that place. Although he couldn't walk, he couldn't see. When he came to the place of the yog pit, he immediately jumped out of his basket and began dancing in ecstasy and confirmed that this was the actual Janambhumi of Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu. Not only that, with his divine vision and inspiration from Gauranga Mahaprabhu, he was able to identify the Srivas Angam and other places of pastimes in that area that we now worship to this present day. Eventually, after coming and going between Vrindavan and Navadvip, he decided to make residence there in Navadvip Dham. And he requested Bhaktivinoda Thakur to build a place so that when people came to see him, they would have some shade. So Bihari got some land, they made a little hut, and they made a bhajan kutir for Jagannath Babaji to continue his chanting. Now, our line of disciplic succession, generally disciplic succession comes by the Diksha Guru. But there is also Siksha Guru that is considered more important. So in the line from Jagannath Babaji, his disciple was Bhagavat Das Babaji. And Bansi Das Babaji took Babaji from the disciple of Jagannath Das Babaji, Bhagavat Das Babaji. And Bansi Das Babaji gave Babaji Diksha to then Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji. And although they had their Diksha gurus, this line of Siksha was considered more relevant to their worship. And then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he took Diksha from Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji. And we know that from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, our eternal spiritual master Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, he then received initiation from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So this line of disciplic succession is coming unbroken, either through Diksha or through Siksha, directly from the Supreme Lord. So this is, in a nutshell, the life of Jagannath Das Babaji. Now we will spend some time hearing about the glories of one of Srila Prabhupada's primary disciples. He was named by Prabhupada Tamal Krishna Das in May of 1968. He was born in New York City, the place where Srila Prabhupada began his preaching in 1965. So Tamal Krishna, he went to, just as Prabhupada did, from New York, he went to the center of the counterculture at that time, which was San Francisco, and he was looking for spiritual direction, just as many young people were in the 60s. He was living in a commune. A commune means people of like minds, they live together, and they have their different practices. So when Srila Prabhupada had established 26 Second Avenue, he had sent some of his disciples, Mukunda, Jamuna, and others, Janaki, and they had established a center on Frederick Street at the Haight-Ashbury area of San Francisco. And they invited Prabhupada to come there in January of 1967. They wanted Prabhupada to come and take part in a very big musical concert that was going to be organized for all the hippies and the residents of San Francisco. It was very successful. Srila Prabhupada chanted Hare Krishna. Thousands upon thousands of young men and women chanted along with Prabhupada. And the Hare Krishna movement became very prominent in that area at that time. Now, while Prabhupada was staying there in San Francisco, he was invited to different places to lecture and to chant Hare Krishna. And he also visited that commune where Tamal Krishna and his good friend Vishnu John were living. So Prabhupada was able to gather up quite a few devotees from that commune. They left the commune and they came to join Prabhupada in San Francisco. So Tamal Krishna and Vishnu John, we know that one cannot take up Krishna consciousness unless they've had some association with devotees in their previous life. They immediately took up Krishna consciousness upon meeting Prabhupada and the devotees, and they became stalwart Sankirtan devotees. At that time, Prabhupada had just begun the Sankirtan in New York City, where the devotees would go and chant in the park. And now in San Francisco, under the guidance of Tamal Krishna and Vishnu John, the devotees began organized Sankirtan and book distribution. We only had Back to Godhead magazines at that time. And every day they would organize Sankirtan, where the devotees would go out for chanting and book distribution. Prabhupada was very pleased with this program, and he had Tamal Krishna also come to Los Angeles, and eventually, in 1969, he sent Tamal Krishna to Europe, because the 3 sets of Grihastha couples had been sent by Prabhupada to London. The Hare Krishna explosion was going to happen in Europe at that time. So Prabhupada sent Tamal Krishna to London to inaugurate the Sankirtan movement there. And he set up Sankirtan successfully. They had a big Rath Yatra. And then Prabhupada sent him to Hamburg, Germany, and sent him to Paris to do the same things in France and Germany. So he was a great stalwart of Srila Prabhupada from the very beginning. Then in 1970, something very extraordinary happened. Prabhupada got an order from Sri Rukmini Dwarkadish that he should return to India. And Prabhupada objected that my godbrothers are preaching in India. You have sent me here in the Western countries. I'm having some success. Why should I go back to India? And Dwarkadish explained to Prabhupada that you have a very nice temple here in Los Angeles, but if you go back to India, I will give you a temple 100 times better than this temple here. So you go immediately. Aside from that, some of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, because Prabhupada would often say that he simply wanted to sit down and complete his life's masterpiece of the translation of Srimad Bhagavatam. So some of his disciples got the idea that they should allow Prabhupada to just sit and translate, and they would take over the management of ISKCON. But Prabhupada felt that they were actually subterfuging his management of ISKCON, and he felt that there was a sabotage going on. So he immediately called Tamal Krishna from Europe. He had him come back to Los Angeles, and with Tamal Krishna, he left America in August of 1970. He went to Japan, where he had sent his disciple Sudama and others who were opening up the Pacific Rim, and he stayed there, and then finally he went with Tamal Krishna to Calcutta, because Prabhupada, he didn't know where that temple was going to be that Dwarkadish told him about. He thought, at least let me make a temple in Mayapur. So with great endeavor of the disciples of Prabhupada, Jayapataka Swami was already there, Achyutananda Swami was already there in India. Now Tamal Krishna was there. With the endeavor of the disciples, they went to Mayapur. They were able to acquire land that our TOVP temple is now being constructed upon. That's the original land that they got for Srila Prabhupada and ISKCON. Now Prabhupada was in India. He had a small contingency of 40 devotees that he called from all over the world, one devotee from each temple. And he had Tamal Krishna be, at that time, the GBC. Prabhupada had just established the GBC, and Tamal was one of the original GBC members. And Prabhupada made him the GBC of all of India. And they traveled and preached Prabhupada's Sankirtan party, the World Sankirtan Party, all over India. And eventually in 1972, Prabhupada awarded Tamal Krishna with sannyas in Jaipur at the Govindaji temple. In the back they have a big garden there. They had a huge, and there he received the sannyas order. So now as a sannyasi, Prabhupada wanted the GBC at that time to be grihastas so that they could stay in one place and oversee the management. So now Tamal Krishna was no longer a grihasta, he was a sannyasi, so he began to travel and preach throughout India. At the same time, his good friend Vishnu Jan was doing extensive preaching in America through the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party. They were traveling all over in buses, performing dramas, distributing books, making devotees. But Vishnu Jan needed help, and they had a very close bonded relationship. So, although Tamal Krishna Maharaj was the GBC of all of India, he requested Srila Prabhupada that please allow me to go and preach with Vishnu Jan. So Prabhupada gave him permission, and here in India we suffered greatly because Tamal Krishna was an excellent manager, and after him, one GBC, next GBC, next GBC, they all kept running away from India until Srila Prabhupada eventually established Gopal Krishna Maharaj as our GBC here. Tamal Krishna Goswami, he then returned to America and joined his friend Vishnu Jan Swami, and they made the most successful preaching instrument within ISKCON, the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan parties. They had so many buses. The first bus was with Radha Damodar, the original deities that were being worshipped by Vishnu Jan Swami. They're now being worshipped at Gita Nagari. You can go there and take their darshan. Very beautiful deities. But Tamal Krishna, with his expertise at management, he was able to attract young men from all of the colleges around America and bring them into Krishna consciousness, turn them into first-class devotees. And he had hundreds of young men on these buses traveling all over America, making devotees. It was like a nuclear reaction. They would get a bus, put devotees in there, go traveling, get more devotees, more buses, and like that they were traveling all over America, just collecting up all these young men who became members of the Radha Damodar Sankirtan party. The problem was, when they would come to the temples, because remember the grihastas were mostly in charge of the temples, the young brahmacharis who were joining in the temples, they wanted to go along with the Radha Damodar party. And there was a big argument between the grihastas and the sannyasis at that time, 1976. And it became a worldwide world war. And it was brought to the attention of Srila Prabhupada. And in the 1976 GBC meetings, there was an objection made, a very strong objection, that Tamal Krishna Goswami is ruining our temples in America. He's stealing our men without our permission. And it was brought to Srila Prabhupada. Now, we all knew that Tamal Krishna Maharaj was doing wonderful preaching, wonderful book distribution. There was a huge competition between Rameshwar Swami and Tamal Krishna Maharaj. None of them were going to live unless they could beat each other in book distribution. These wonderful times, these early 70s of book distribution in Sankirtan. But when Srila Prabhupada saw that the devotees were suffering as a result of this magnificent preaching that Tamal Krishna Maharaj was doing, he called him one day. And he said, "Now you go to China. You have caused too much disturbance here." And Tamal Krishna Maharaj refused. Prabhupada, we're doing so much preaching. How can I go to China and just give it all up? And then Prabhupada called Trivikram Swami, who was at that time preaching in Hong Kong. And he called Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And when Tamal Krishna Maharaj saw Trivikram Swami, he said, I'm not going. I'm not going. He didn't want to go. So then Prabhupada said, all right, then you just sit here in Mayapur and chant. You have a choice. Either you go to China or you sit and chant in Mayapur. So he had no choice. He had to go to China to begin preaching. Now, we don't know the potency of Tamal Krishna Maharaj. At that time, there wasn't a single Chinese devotee. And he took what appeared to be, sometimes it appears to be a punishment. It appeared to be a punishment. Actually, it was the greatest blessing. Because when Srila Prabhupada sent Tamal Krishna Maharaj to China, he took it so seriously. He grew his hair. He became a businessman. He went into inner China and for the first time began preaching. And Prabhupada was so pleased with him. He took the Light of the Bhagavat magazine. He had it made in Chinese classical painting. That was the first book printed. And then with the devotees who had joined in Hong Kong, which is not, it wasn't at that time a part of mainland China, he had translations made of Prabhupada's books, the Bhagavad Gita and other books. And in that way, the continent of Asia became devotees of Krishna. To this day now, we have thousands of devotees in China, mainland China, Hong Kong, with temples. Although it's completely against the law, they're still practicing devotees. And in fact, at one point, the cultural department of China, in order to have cross-cultural relations with India, they actually made a translation of the Srimad Bhagavat Purana, Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavat Purana. And we have those books. So now there's preaching going on all over China simply because Tamal Krishna Maharaj took that instruction very seriously. So that was 1976. Then the beginning of 1977, Srila Prabhupada's health was failing. And Prabhupada had a program. He wanted each of his GBC members to spend 1 month. There were 12 GBC members at that time, 12 months in the year. Every month a different GBC member would be Prabhupada's secretary and travel with him so that he could train them in proper management. But at the beginning of 1977, he called Tamal Krishna to be his secretary, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj stayed with him up until Srila Prabhupada's disappearance as his secretary in November of 1977. Whenever there was any problem, wherever Prabhupada was in the world, he would tell his secretary, call Tamal, and Tamal would come to him, just as he did in Los Angeles. So now Srila Prabhupada, winding up his earthly pastimes here, he kept Tamal Krishna Goswami by his side as his secretary, and the final pastimes, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he wrote many books. Two of them, particularly at that time, Servant of the Servant, which is his whole autobiography of how he met Srila Prabhupada, how he became Prabhupada's disciple and servant, and particularly TKG's diary. It was very difficult to keep a diary when you were Srila Prabhupada's servant, because 24 hours you were on call. But he kept handwritten notes. And after Srila Prabhupada disappeared, he organized all of those notes, and he prepared the TKG diary that you can read. So up until the last breath, Tamal Krishna Das Goswami was serving Srila Prabhupada as his personal secretary. He placed Srila Prabhupada in Samadhi here. And then, on the order of the GBC, he, along with 11 other disciples who had already been recommending so many disciples to Srila Prabhupada for initiation, they then became the initiating disciples who now accepted their own disciples. Now, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he had a very big preaching area. He was given very difficult places to preach. For instance, there's a part of America where there's strict, strong, Orthodox Christians. It's called the Bible Belt of America. He was given that area, and he preached there. And not only did he preach there, but he decided that these people are very, very religious in their own way. They have their own dharma. So I am going to, there's an expression that Prabhupada would use. You enter like a pin, and you become a plow. So what Tamal Krishna Maharaj did was, when he was preaching there, particularly in Texas, in Dallas, he decided that he would become a scholar in their own theology. And he joined the Southern Methodist University, which is like the Harvard of that area. And he became a renowned, topmost, dean list, everything, best, getting all these awards at the Methodist, which is a Christian university. And he was highly respected by all the theologians there, all of the Christian teachers. And from there, he went on to work on his PhD at Cambridge in the UK. So he combined Krishna consciousness with the scholastic world by making himself a highly respected scholar within the scholarly world of theology. At the time of Srila Tamal Krishna Maharaj's disappearance, he was working on his PhD thesis. His thesis was to establish Srila Prabhupada as a genuine influence on the school of theology in the Western world. So he was working on that thesis, his PhD thesis, and because he was engaged in academia for the past 6 years, getting his bachelor's and now working on his PhD, he had not gone to the GBC meetings in those 6 years. So he decided at that time, it was 2003, he decided he would go to the GBC meetings that year. So he wrote to his godbrothers that I'm going now. And he went again for the first time. He was one of the only original GBCs at that time who were still GBCs. Most of them had become emeritus GBCs. So he went there and he highly inspired all of the members of the GBC by his presence. Every night after the GBC meetings in his rooms, he would have a huge Sankirtan party with all the devotees attending. But then because of his responsibilities of his PhD, he had to return to UK. So he booked his ticket for after the GBC meetings, March 15th. And he told his servant, I have an early flight, I have to get up at this time. He chose his taxi driver who was going to take him to Dum Dum Airport. And he was supposed to rise early and get there in time for his flight. But at the time when he was supposed to rise, he was still deeply sleeping. His servant didn't want to disturb him. So he got up late. And he was very upset with his servant. Why you didn't wake me? He only had a little bit of time to get to the airport now. And we didn't, in those days, we only had a little 2-lane highway to get from Mayapur to Dum Dum Airport. Very treacherous road. So he tried to rush. He got in the car. He had his disciples with him. He had the president of New Zealand New Barsana Temple, Kalasambara, and Kalasambara's wife, Vrindavaneshwari, who was Tamal Krishna Maharaj's disciple, was sitting right behind him in the car. He was sitting next to the driver, and Kalasambara was sitting behind the driver. They were rushing. They went to Shantipur, they got through Shantipur, And then they got to Fulyagram. Fulyagram is the holy place where Haridas Thakur lived in a cave, chanting 3 lakhs Hare Krishna Maha Mantra every day. There, a big truck was coming right on the same road, right towards them. And the driver panicked. Now, normally when a driver, he'll think of his own safety first. So he panicked and he swayed that way. So the truck didn't hit the driver. It hit face on Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And he died on the spot there at that holy place. And his disciple behind him also died. The driver, he lost his legs, but he survived. And Kalasambara is still preaching to this day. He was protected. So we all remember that day, those of us who were present. I was on my way to Delhi preaching. I called them up. I said, I'll be late. There's a traffic jam. They said, Tamal Krishna Maharaj has just disappeared. So this is his disappearance. I said, no, that's impossible. It didn't happen. When I got to Delhi, I found that it happened. I jumped on a plane, went to Mayapur. We all joined together. Whoever was here in India, right at the time of the GBC meetings, we all honored Tamal Krishna Maharaj as he came back to be placed in Samadhi. And to this day now, 23 years later, we're still remembering how he touched each one of our hearts. He was senior most amongst us. We all took shelter of him. We all honored him for his ability to make devotees, to make temples, to guide us as the right-hand man of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada called him. He said, Tamal is my right-hand man and Bhavananda is my left-hand man. So that was confirmed by Srila Prabhupada. So on this day, we'll have a special ceremony throughout the day to honor Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Please, everyone, take part. And if there are any questions now, it's 9 o'clock. We can answer some questions. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to the great Bhagavat Acharyas who we're honoring today. Yes, Prabhu.
Yes, Maharaj is known. Haribo. Haribo. There's 2 switches. Haribo. So although Tamal Krishna Maharaj is well known for his preaching, excellent preaching, sometimes he was also be a little bit argumentative with Prabhupada. So how do we see that even though he was so successful and so powerful, but sometimes he'd be very strong minded in demeanor? How do we see that?
You'd have to give an example.
Oh, well, just refusing to go to China. Generally nobody would refuse Srila Prabhupada. And sometimes maybe arguing certain points, Prabhupada say something and he would say, I think otherwise. But Prabhupada accepted on a managerial level because he was his top man, GBC and whatnot. But I've heard, and I also been with Tamal, that he could be very heavy. So yes. How do we see his heaviness?
We just accept it and pray that his heaviness will keep us in line as well. He was a very heavy manager. And he was very strict with those who worked under him because he knew Prabhupada's standard. And Prabhupada had personally trained him in his Krishna consciousness. So therefore he was very capable to train those who worked under him, who served under him. And so far as argumentativeness with Srila Prabhupada, that was for further training. Prabhupada would give him an order. He might have some objections, but Prabhupada would smash all of those objections so that he could continue without any reservation in those orders that Prabhupada gave him. Yes, Prabhu.
It's hearsay, but I heard that Tamal's closer,
Hold it closer.
that Tamal's closer associates that he was directing had
Yes.
a nickname for him, which was Turmoil Krishna.
Turmoil?
Because he was so powerful, he would change everything.
Yes, he would. Savidrik Prabhu.
It's just a detail of the occurrence, and Prabhupada ended that Radha Damodar adventure with Tamal Krishna Goswami. He was stunned when it happened, and he said in jest, "Well, I might as well go to China," like that. And then it was like the next night or next day, Prabhupada called Tamal Krishna Goswami in, and he didn't want to go because he sensed, oh no, he kind of sensed this was going to happen, and it did. That Prabhupada sending him to China, so it was kind of interesting little detail there.
Did you join on the Radha Damodar party?
No. I joined later, 1980.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Jai.